Hey everybody, what is going on? I am Maximus Rex and this is Big Baby Reviews. Today is JAE LEE Day, so we're looking at YOUNGBLOOD STRIKEFILE, issue number 1, April 1993. This is the issue where I was introduced to JAE LEE's art in full. I had heard about him in Wizard magazine a few months earlier, back in the day when I was a kid. He had been working at Marvel. We've done the reviews of his Namor stuff and the Spider-Man 3-parter. And then he moved on to Image Comics, more specifically with Rob Liefeld Extreme Studios, and this story here featuring Chapel in YOUNGBLOOD STRIKEFILE. So, I've talked about before how I do believe that he was doing some stuff concurrently between Marvel and Image. So the last few issues, those three, that Spider-Man 3-parter that I reviewed, I mentioned a lot of times I felt like the art was a bit rushed and maybe, he was really trying to hit that deadline. And then he was probably also working on the Image pages here for Chapel and for Extreme Studios. For Rob Liefeld, and that he was probably putting more time and effort in those ones because I'm pretty sure that Image was paying him a huge crapload more for the YOUNGBLOOD STRIKEFILE pages than what he was getting paid for Spider-Man. It feels like Spider-Man was just, he'd signed that contract for those 3 issues or however that works, and he was just trying to get through it real quick. He wasn't paying a lot, and then, he could spend more time and focus on the YOUNGBLOOD STRIKEFILE pages, which were probably at that point paying, like I said, a huge shitload of money. So starting with the cover, does not disappoint. We've got a great, I remember thinking, of course, Liefeld created Chapel, right? But I think JAE LEE gave us the definitive look of Chapel back in the 90s. And he does obviously make him look a lot scarier, more demonic. Kind of pulled a McFarlane on Liefeld's design where he's making it look a lot creepier and more demonic with the red eyes and this. Did Chapel have red eyes before? I'm not sure. I don't think so. And the teeth kind of being actually pointy and sharp and monster-like, even though, in the original Chapel design by Rob Liefeld, it just feels like he just painted a white skull on his face, right? Here it feels like he's actually demonic, which will play some weird kind of mind games on you when you're reading Spawn and stuff. And then, Spawn eventually confronts Chapel because if you don't know this, I'll blow the mystery. Chapel is apparently originally in early Image continuity, the one who killed Al Simmons 5 years earlier before he came back to Earth as Spawn. And their stories were kind of intermingled. YOUNGBLOOD STRIKEFILE is actually kind of a somewhat of a prologue to that meeting between Chapel and Spawn in the Spawn series. But yeah, so in that Spawn story, eventually Spawn does, uses magic to do something to Chapel's face, which basically makes him look like JAE LEE makes him look, right? But at this point, that hadn't happened yet. So just like, consistency within the Image continuity, at least visually and art-wise, was sometimes a little shaky. But we didn't really care that much because, again, are you going to tell JAE LEE to pull back and draw Chapel as if he looks like he's, painting his face, or are you going to make him look demonic and scary like he's doing here? The answer is on this cover here. Awesome looking cover. Great use of silhouette just on part of him, right? The arm back here, I think all in black is a good idea with having some of the detail here. And you can tell he's putting a lot more detail in the anatomy and the musculature and stuff. Little weird details, drawn kind of or hinting at the belly button, I think is hilarious because I don't think I've ever seen, Rob Liefeld draw a belly button anywhere. And I guess in his original design too, Chapel is wearing some sort of undershirt in the Liefeld design here. He's just shirtless with a leather coat on top. I mean, the leather coat's really drawn here to kind of look like bat wings. And even though the anatomy is very kind of exaggerated and very Simon Bisley, as I've talked about before, at this period, that influence is pretty strong on JAE LEE. There's still some little things I'll point out that I think he still does in his art, like this kind of effect where part of the arm is in a black shadow and silhouetted, and arm hair or something protruding maybe from the arm or a leg or anything like that is just all in the silhouette and shadow. And I don't think his hands, the way he draws his hands, has not changed that much. There was always something a little more, even though drawn kind of in a hasty line, just something a little more illustrative about the way he does hands. And these little points, right, on the gloves, you got him here. Here they're a little rougher on the jacket, but he has this thing where he'll do that even still today in his modern artwork, where he'll throw a point on a shoulder, Batman's cape, or where there's almost a natural angle, he'll just throw that in there. It's an aesthetic thing he does. That I just was surprised to notice, looking back on this issue, that he was doing it as early on as this, even though he was using those, exaggerated Simon Bisley Image-esque kind of proportions. What this image implies as well is that he's been shot in the chest this is probably a scar, I guess, or someone didn't color it right. I feel like maybe that's more of a scar. So he's been shot in the chest here and shot twice in the head. And I guess the bullets have not penetrated because obviously, you know, anyone else would be dead. I don't know. I mean, aesthetically, stylistically, you know, for the cool factor, it totally works. And I really, it doesn't bother me, but I'm wondering if, you know, from what I know from this period Chapel and when he's in Youngblood, he doesn't necessarily have superpowers. He's basically kind of just a guy with big guns, right? And I'd never, funnily enough, someone had back in the day mentioned that Chapel's kind of a rip-off of the Punisher, and I never really saw it right away for some strange reason, or maybe I didn't want to see it at that age. But yeah, I mean, he's basically just taken the skull logo and put it on his face, right? Not the JAE LEE version, the Rob Liefeld version. Anyways, enough about the cover. It just looks great. Let's move on with the review, because YOUNGBLOOD STRIKEFILE is also a flip book, so there's only 12 pages of story and art, so this review might not be actually that long. Creator plot, Rob Liefeld. Pencils and inks, JAE LEE. Script, Rob Liefeld, Eric Stevenson. Color design and separation, Steve Oliff and Ollie Optics. Lettering, Kurt Hathaway. I remembered the colors. Maybe it's not this particular series that JAE LEE did some image stuff. There were some, maybe it's the Wildcats one, which I'll be reviewing soon. But I felt like the colors weren't so great, and now having, you know, gone through it before the review and looking at it now, I think Steve Oliff actually did a really good job. I always said in those Marvel issues that there was a nice kind of just keep it simple, flat color kind of usage all throughout the comic that I think worked well with JAE LEE's art. But what Steve Oliff here is doing is almost that. There's a few little variations in the color and, you know, from dark to light and things like that, but they're pretty subtle as compared to other stuff he's doing for Image. And I would say actually that I find the coloring pretty I don't want to say subdued, but held back a bit as opposed to other stuff, and it works really well in the JAE LEE art that he's given us here. A lot of the same tricks we saw from before. Lots of silhouette work where he just throws in, you know, the white medium here for the guns that are all ablaze in here. And used throughout. He uses the same kind of splashy inking for the background, and let's just mention it right away, there will be almost no backgrounds in this issue. At least I don't even think there are for this sequence here, but he knew he was going to Image and they probably wouldn't mind. So I still think, you know, the visual of Chapel here is really great. This shot here, this one here, but yeah, just the backgrounds, just like in Namor and a lot of that Spider-Man run, it's just colorist filling that in. So we get a cool double, I wouldn't call it a double page splash, but a double page, you know, transition of continuity or story, however you want to put it there. Using a screen tone here, which again was pretty rare for those Image guys. So Eric Larson used a bit of it, but I'd like to see it here, kind of stuff he was doing on Namor, still using it. To have highlighted the nipples in this faraway shot of Chapel, I think is a mistake. JAE LEE, as great of an artist as he is already at this point, tends to put the nipples kind of high. I don't know if that's just me, but it looks a little odd on Chapel here, and down here, it just looks like he's got boobs. Those just look like boobs, right? I do applaud the design he's using, the angular kind of thing he's doing. Always still, even though some of the gruff artwork being pretty elegant with his layouts, you know, like I said, the gruff kind of stuff going on here. And again, minimal background. This is your establishing shot here. They're at some sort of maybe oil refinery or some sort of, you know, industrial plant, but that's about all we get here for backgrounds in the first 3 pages. We've got our generic kind of cybernetic demon dudes that JAE LEE draws a lot of, kind of similar to what he was doing in Namor. They look cool. They look all right. This guy's face here getting blown off is pretty cool. There's a bit of an Aliens vibe maybe to what's going on with this guy. And I mean, this is an Image comic through and through. Maybe this is more what people would criticize Image about, having no backgrounds and stuff. I know Rob Liefeld was an offender, at least during a certain period. JAE LEE is probably the worst of them all. But I mean, the figure work looks so cool and so evocative that I guess we kind of just, you know, forgave him for that back then. Just because the characters, Image was a little bit about Image, and the characters just look so dang cool, right? Few things here. Once again, the really high nipples just are unsettling to me. They almost look more like a second set of eyes. It's just odd. Love, again, Chapel's proportions, the really small waist, the Simon Bisley stuff, the random spikes coming out of his boots or pants or both. that, you know, you don't know what it is, but it looks cool. The rough kind of inking down here, and this is Al Simmons, right, who will become Spawn eventually. On his legs down here, I think are pretty cool. Lots of white medium added after. Almost fully silhouetted guns. So you can, again, he's putting more effort into these pages than I think the Spider-Man stuff. The coloring's probably helping too to make it look cool. But he's still doing the full kind of silhouette with just a few, excuse me, that's not part of the gun. Just a few highlights here to tell you, you know, what it is. This, I mean, his silhouettes are pretty effective enough to, you understand the shape of a gun. It's pretty obvious. But yeah, just these little touches of white to add little reflections and you know, highlight certain parts of the gun, I think is genius. And you can get through a drawing like this pretty quickly, even though, you know, like I said, it's a double page splash. Seems like there'd be a lot of stuff to do, but again, no backgrounds. I like what he did it before, and he's doing it again, where Al Simmons, for example, right, he's got light reflecting on him, but then the other arm is almost fully a silhouette. And then with this guy, he does the same thing. He's further in the background. He's got even more shadow on his arm here that's closer to us, and then the one that's furthest away, once again, just full silhouette. And again, I gotta believe that, you know, you draw the nipples here. This guy's got no shirt, so you draw that one. But I mean, he's specifically, you know, pulled the shirt back here so that Al Simmons' nipple is exposed. So I don't know if JAE LEE had some sort of nipple fetish at this period, or maybe still does. Maybe someone out there can answer that. That'd be interesting to know. Not really, I don't care. But it's a hypothesis. I feel like with this comic, even as a kid, I'm like, man, there's certainly is a lot of nipple imagery. Probably done with white medium here, and maybe even added after as an afterthought. But I like that he just had the balls to go in there and do it. I really do feel like that's just literally white medium on top to do the chains, which again is smart and time-wise very, very cost-effective. This stuff, this image particularly, always kind of brought me back to, I remember even back in the day, aesthetically to Nick Manabat, the artist who did Cybernary, right? Those couple of backup features, and then he passed away very early on. There was something in here that to me felt like some of the textures and the look that JAE LEE was getting here is because he had looked at Cybernary. There's definitely a kinship between some of the stuff that JAE LEE is doing and some of the stuff that Nick Manabat was doing as far as shadows and textures and stuff. Not the same kind of proportions and line, but there's something similar there. Love this kind of creature, cybernetic demon guy, once again, that he draws. Very cool. I'm not sure how effective this is. It looks cool graphically, but like, do you really, you know, I know he's shooting guns and stuff, but that doesn't feel, you know, maybe we should see more of the gun behind it or something. I don't know. It does feel like an easy solution to get out of it, and quick solution and not have to draw too much, which again, JAE LEE's a master at. Get a bit of background here. That's fun. Probably didn't take too long. So we're in a hangar of some sort, right? And Chapel, of course, is eventually confronted, an image trope, right? Confronted by the villain, but he's not actually on site. Geiger, who I believe maybe was he introduced in here, or in does he appear later in Youngblood or something? Maybe he was introduced here. I don't know for sure. But yeah, just generic extreme villain. And I feel like he was introduced before, because it's like JAE LEE doing a kind of Rob Liefeld-esque design. I could be wrong on that. Maybe it's the opposite, and then Rob Liefeld kind of extrapolated from what JAE LEE did. I don't know. Definitely an Extreme Studios kind of character for sure. So yeah, you know, the typical gloating of the villain. And as they run out, you know, they confront this guy and basically know that he's kind of a traitor or something, right? The agency doesn't look too fondly on traitors, Duke, old boy. So we just know he's a traitor because they kind of mention it. So, you know, again, it's not the kind of story you you're reading for the greatness of the story. You're mostly looking at the art, I think. Here's an interesting thing. They took one of his silhouettes and kind of lightened it up here, right? I do feel like JAE LEE drew that, but then through some sort of digital thing, they kind of altered it, and I think it does kind of get lost in the panel. Not a great decision. You know, at worst, you lighten this and maybe make a white or a yellow silhouette so it pops, right, as opposed to the background, so it doesn't really work here. And here's another one of those great JAE LEE panels where I'm like, man, how quickly do you get through that one? This is one of those panels when you get to, you're like, you're so happy that you can draw that and just move on. Lots of dirty white medium, dirty inks, you know, quickly done, just quick silhouettes. I assume the Chapel face was added after, just a bit of white medium. I talk a lot about white medium because when I for some reason for the longest time I was like, no, it has to be perfect, and then I figured out that so many illustrators and artists use white medium to correct things, and that it's okay to do that, right? I was kind of stupid about that. This, I'll just say, was kind of interesting, but graphically, I mean, it's a quick way out. Once again, I don't know, like if someone's getting shot in the head, maybe there's a cooler way of doing that. To me, like you would have, I like the spray and stuff, but maybe to see like more actual chunks and brain matter. I know I'm being a little bit gory, but this feels like a quick and easy way out. And we're back at the office with Al Simmons and Chapel. We've got Jason Wynn here, so characters from the Spawn universe, right? As I said, this is a prologue to Chapel and Spawn meeting in that title. I've reviewed those. You can check those out in my archive. And again, this is taking place 5 years before the Spawn series, right? Because Al Simmons is still alive. So here we're fast forwarding 5 years, and Chapel's no longer working for Jason Wynn. Al Simmons is dead, at least, to their knowledge. They don't know about Spawn or anything at this point. And Jason Wynn is asked to meet with Chapel, and he's offering him something that requires his considerable talents, is what he says. So I'm assuming it's a hit job, right? Chapel's that kind of character. Just want to real quick, some odd, like, almost Walt Simonson looking lines in this one panel here for some reason. Kind of cool. Makes it dynamic with it not actually being a very dynamic image. Very cool. Just through lines, right? So Chapel's not interested, and then of course Wynn's gonna threaten him, right? It would be a shame if your adoring public were suddenly made privy to the sordid details of your past, right? So he's threatening him a little bit. Chapel says, "I'm not your boy no more. I ain't your boy no more, Wynn. Try to remember that, right, when you threaten me." And then Wynn, of course, the arrogant Chapel is still the arrogant fool, aren't we? How very unfortunate. I need you to pull up I need you to pull up a number from my Rolodex for me. I believe you'll find it under G. The name is Geiger. So, the character from the past story is going to come into the present story, probably next issue of YOUNGBLOOD STRIKEFILE. And I just want to say this is kind of one of the first images that we saw of Chapel, and already, JAE Lee's art style has changed quite a bit. He was throwing in a lot more detail. I know the image is fragmented here, but you can find online just the full image used as an advert. It wasn't actually cut up like this. They use that advert illustration for this page here. Kind of a collage kind of deal, I guess, or just digitally, right? And yeah, I do remember seeing this, and as compared to what we got in this issue, he's thrown down a lot more shadows. And again, just find a very kind of time and cost-effective way to get through the pages and still make them exciting. Obviously, this was used as promotion, so maybe he put a bit more time in the detailing on the guns and stuff. And here's another image. Again, even though it's been cut up and stuff, hopefully you guys can see. There's a bit of that in some of the inking and the textures, that Nick Manabat kind of aesthetic that I was telling you about in the shoulder pad here and the gun too. I kind of see it. All right, well, there you go, guys. That is it for my review today of YOUNGBLOOD STRIKEFILE #1. If you're still watching and you are subscribed, thank you so much. I really do appreciate the support. If you're watching but you're not subscribed, please do so below. It only takes a second for you. Really helps the channel out, helps us grow, helps get us out there to other people who are into comic books just like we are. We're running up on 500 subscribers where excuse me, not Youngblood, but YouTube actually recognizes us as an official channel. So if you can help out with that, I really would appreciate it. So everyone out there watching, thank you so much. I really do appreciate it, and have an awesome day. King Comics presents Big Baby Volume 1, issues 1 to 13, 204 pages of story and art. King Comics also presents Star Crasher one-shot, 32 pages, cosmic sci-fi surrealist adventure. You can find these fine comics at KingComics.CA, at MaximusRex13 on Instagram, or on Facebook, MaxRex or Big Baby. Like!